Hello and welcome to Channel 981, the home of intergalactic news. I'm your host, Major Tom. On today's episode, it's a very special one. On top of the average broadcast, we'll be hosting a social experiment. But first, the U.S. to approve a moon mission by a space venture. You can follow up on this topic at our website, www.channel981news.nasa.gov. Now to Minor Tom with sports.
Not much is happening in sports, but the space rugby season has just begun.
Wow, sports are great. Do you know what else is great? Gravity. Did you know that the average human being has a misconception of how gravity works in space? We brought our top reporters, Jameson and Rasha, to further assess the public about this matter. Jameson?
We're here with choir kid Nick Ramirez, and we're going to ask him about a question about physics. And the question is, why do astronauts float in space?
Because there's no the gravitational pull from other bodies, celestial bodies, aren't close enough or strong enough to let them be pulled by gravity, so they're just floating.
Thank you for your answer. Why do astronauts float in space?
There's no gravity in space? I don't know.
Now the question is, why do astronauts float in space?
Wait, hold on. What was the question?
Why do astronauts float in space?
There's no gravity.
Thank you for your response.
Because the black holes make them levitate.
Why is it that in space, astronauts float?
Because the gravity is weaker.
Why do astronauts float in space?
Oh. Wait, can I get a different question? Or do I have to answer this one? Dang it. Okay. Astronauts float in space because zero gravity.
Why do astronauts float in space?
There's no atmosphere pushing down on them to keep them down.
Because they ain't no gravity. Hi, Mr. Eisenberg.
Cause no gravity, dude.
Why do astronauts float in space?
There's no gravity to hold them down anywhere.
Why do astronauts float in space?
They're magical. That's about it.
Why do astronauts float in space?
Astronauts actually do not float. They are in constant free fall. Can I go back to chess?
All right, the question is, why do astronauts float in space?
Cause gravity.
Because gravity. All right, thank you. All right, so the question is, why do astronauts float in space?
There's no gravity.
All right, so why do astronauts float in space?
Because there's no gravity.
There's no gravity.
No gravity.
No gravity.
I know the answer. Do you want to say it?
Because there's no gravity.
All right, thank you. So why do astronauts float in space?
Because they're in a vacuum.
Oh, because there's no air.
Yeah, there's no air.
Why do astronauts float in space?
There's no gravity.
There's no gravity.
Why do astronauts float in space?
They're in a state of free fall. Oh, the wrong answer? The right answer? The right answer? Because there's no gravity in space.
So let's help this choir kid out. You see, the reason why astronauts float in space is not because of zero gravity. In fact, the amount of gravity in space is about the same as it is here. Even though gravity does weaken as you get farther away from the certain object that's gravitating you, it's not that much weaker that they would float in space. The reason why they float in space is because they're in a state of free fall. Everything is falling, including the space station. So as the space station is orbiting around the Earth, it is falling. That is why the astronauts float in the space station.
Would that mean that without the space station, astronauts would just fall into space?
No, they'd be floating, but they're in a state of free fall. That's why it looks like it's falling.
Okay.
It's really incredible how many people don't know how gravity works in space.
It's mesmerizing how many people really don't understand the concept of gravity.
You're right. That's why we present this new segment, How to Physics.
How to Physics?
So when we interviewed, a lot of people responded, the reason why astronauts float is because there's no gravity in space. However, there is gravity in space, and today I'm going to show you why. So we can find out the force of gravity on Earth, the surface of Earth, by this equation. F force equals G times M1 times M2 over R2. And G is the gravitational constant. M1 is the mass of the average human being. Mass 2 is the mass of Earth. And R is the distance between Earth, the center of Earth, and the person. Next slide. Now, this is just a diagram to explain everything. The radius, weight of Earth, weight of the human, and the gravitational constant is down there. Next slide. Now, the solution. I did the math. I found the force of gravity to be 686.24 newtons. Now, we can find out the acceleration using the formula F equals ma. So we simply divide the force by the mass to get the acceleration, and we found out that is 9.803 meters per second per second. And as we all know, that is the rate which objects accelerate due to gravity near Earth. Now, next slide. Now, this is the force of gravity in space, and it's just the same formula, except this time the radius is a little bit different. So all we have to do is add the 400 kilometers between the International Space Station and Earth to the radius, and then we just use that in the equation. So next slide. Actually, yeah, here's a little diagram of that, like before. Next slide. And then doing the equation, I found the force to be 686.16 newtons, and then using F equals ma, I found the acceleration to be 9.802. As you can see, that's practically the same as before, and so this proves the theory that there is zero gravity in space. There's quite a bit. Conclusion: the force acting on a human is 686.24 newtons on Earth, and then in space, in the International Space Station, the force would be 686.16 newtons, and therefore I conclude that the difference in gravity is negligible, and that is not the reason why astronauts float in space. Yes, you in the back.
What about deep space?
Well, the thing is, astronauts have never actually been to deep space, so you shouldn't have been thinking about that when I asked the questions, why do astronauts float in space? Here's a little picture of someone floating in space. I'm playing my favorite game, chess.
Part 2.
I see you have another question.
So, why do astronauts float?
Well, I was just about to answer that question. This presentation is why astronauts float. Now, to explain this, I want to first explain the concept of Newton's cannon. And that is that if you have a cannon and you fire it off, it's going to go for a bit and then it's going to fall. But if you can fire it with more speed, it will go even farther before it falls. And eventually, you reach a speed that goes so fast that it will launch into orbit. And so the force of gravity actually causes it to spin around the Earth. It creates a centripetal acceleration because the cannon wants to go this way, but then the gravity pulls it down like this, and so it goes like this. Next slide. And then this is just, well, this is not an FBD because this is the force of gravity, but the trajectory is not a force. But this just allows you to conceptualize the idea. Now, another concept I want you to understand is that this idea of an elevator. So Einstein once thought that if a man was standing in an elevator on top of a scale, and then the elevator was cut and started to fall, the scale would actually read 0, because the scale, along with the person, is falling. And so it would slowly go down to 0. And see, since you're not pushing down on the scale cannot be pushing up on you. Next slide. And here's a little diagram of that. It's pretty incredible. Next one. Alright, and this is the orbit of the ISS. Now the ISS is like the idea of Newton's cannon, is that it's orbiting around the Earth. And the trajectory is different from gravity. and gravity ends up creating a centripetal acceleration. Next slide. Now, free fall. Free fall is the idea that an object that is the only force acting upon that object is gravity, then it is said to be in free fall. So both the astronaut and the space station are in free fall, and that is why the astronaut appears to be floating and is weightless. Oh yes, another question.
Can I float on Earth?
I think that your experience in life should be able to answer that question.
So if I jumped off this building, will I float?
You will not, because you will not be able to go fast enough to actually reach an orbit. You will plummet straight into the ground, and depending on how the height from which you dropped, you might die or be severely injured.
Oh.
So it is not a good idea.
Thank you.
Sure, I may have just saved your life.
Commercial break.
Do you hate it when your phone drops? Do you have butterfingers? Well, this product's for you. The Gravity Case by Space. Look at this man, and look at his pride now.
Wow, that's great.
Well, what have we learned today, folks?
Well, I learned that most people don't really understand what gravity is.
You're right, Jameson.
Well, hopefully, I spread my knowledge to some more people today, and in the future, they will teach other people about this knowledge.
Well, that's it. Follow us on social media and make sure you check out our website.
We're your hosts, Major and Minor Tom, signing off.
Okay, that's good.